Joining me now, Renee Nickell. She's a Gold Star sister. She's the author of the book Always My Hero: The Road to Hope in Healing Following My Brother's Death in Afghanistan. Renee, first and foremost, who was Major Sam Griffith? What happened?
Sam was my older brother. We were about 2 years apart, and he was on his third deployment. His first two were in Iraq. He was an F-18 fighter pilot. And then after his first tour, he decided that he wanted to be on the ground. And so that's when he joined the 4th Anglico, and he deployed to Iraq a second time on the ground. It was uneventful. And then his third time, he volunteered to go to Afghanistan. And, that's the one my parents really worried.
Renee, I was on the ground. It was not fun. Why in the world would somebody leave the coolness of flying an F-18 to go down on the ground and eat crappy food and poop in the weeds?
When I talked to my mom about this, my brother just felt like, he had done a tour in the air, and he had a lot of expertise that he just wanted to bring to these other Marines. And I think he just really wanted to make a difference. And, he did extensive training. He became a JTAC, and he trained these Marines. And, after training them, he wanted to deploy with them. And his goal, he said before he deployed, his goal was to make sure that each and every single one of them came home alive. And unfortunately, he didn't, but they did.
That's the kind of man who builds nations right there. What happened in Afghanistan?
He was, he was a forward air controller. So he would watch, radio, video screen, and call in air support. And he saw one of his Marines under heavy fire for a few days. And, Sergeant Hartzell came back to base, and my brother basically said, you need a break, you need some rest, you're going to do what I do, you're going to take the radio, and I'm going to take your place tomorrow. And then Sergeant Winters, he asked Sergeant Winters if he would come, with him. It was a 4-man team, and 2 of them stayed behind, and Sam and Sergeant Winters went out on patrol the next day. And they got about 200 feet from the compound, and, bullets just started to rain down. And they were able to, get behind a mound, and actually there was a ditch there. And, Sam knew that, they were just getting ambushed. They were going to lose a lot of lives. They were out there with the British Marines as well. So he decided to expose himself so that he could at least get a visual from where the gunfire was coming from. And unfortunately, he lost his life. They were able to make positive identification, and his actions ended up saving all the guys out there that day.
That's wonderful. Beyond the Marine, pilot, and ground pounder, what kind of guy was Sam? What was he like as a kid? What was he like as an adult?
He was hilarious. He was a prankster. He was a jokester. He loved making people laugh. That's the side I grew up with. Is he was just this humble guy that was friends with everybody. And I remember that even through school and through high school, he just befriended everybody. He was just very kind. And even if you met him, after he became a pilot, even if you met him on the street, you wouldn't have even known he was a pilot. You would have never known he was an officer. He never boasted about those things. And that's one thing that his Marines remember about him, is that even though he was their commander, he was just one of them. There was a real brotherhood, because he just never saw himself better than anybody else. Just an amazing person.
Obviously, this is not something that's easy or fun for a family. I mean, what could be more devastating than to lose, your older brother, lose somebody who's such a wonderful human being? How does a family deal with that? How do you get by? How do you move on? I mean, I think about my own sons. I think about losing my own brothers. It just kills me.
Yeah. Actually, after I wrote the book, the reason why I wrote the book is because I really wanted to give siblings a voice, because I consider them the forgotten mourners, because, after a loss, and I think after any kind of loss, it's natural for people to gravitate towards the parents and the spouse and the children, and the siblings often become sort of the support system for everybody else. And there's been studies that show that siblings don't even really begin the grieving process until about 2 years after the loss. And that's sort of where I was. And about 4 months after my brother was killed, I fell into a very, very deep depression. I was hospitalized. I was having suicidal ideation. I didn't know how to cope in life without him. We had been together since we were born, and he was my best friend, and he was like a father figure to me. And so, I really postponed my own grief for a long time. It took me a long time to get out of that, but I did, and I wanted to write my story. I wrote Always My Hero to give siblings a voice. And even as recently, the last 18 months, I've been working on the screenplay, and I just did the final edits yesterday. And so I've really been immersed the last couple days, especially just going over it, just reading it over and over and over, about that sibling bond. And, it's a really important story to tell. It's really important that other siblings, especially, Gold Star siblings, really anybody who has lost somebody that they were close to, brother-sister relationship, that they feel validated. And I was reading statistics, and there's more households that have siblings than have fathers. So that's an overwhelming statistic. Yeah. When you think about siblings spend more time their entire lives than any other person, yet they're the least recognized, after a tragedy like this.
Renee, thank you so much for writing the book, for helping people through it. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Semper Fi.